I'm Lindsay Sullivan.
And I'm Rachel Pombrio.
And we're Physiology correspondents coming to you live from Empire Commons.
Headline news for today is all about the follicle stimulating hormone, better known as FSH, which is shown here.
FSH is a gonadotropic hormone secreted by cells in the anterior pituitary called gonadotropes that regulate the activity of the baby-making organs, also known as the gonads or sex organs. Other smaller but less important functions of FSH that will be discussed are its role in puberty and menopause. It is classified as a protein hormone that is composed of two subunits, an alpha subunit which is also present in luteinizing hormone, more commonly referred to as LH, and a beta subunit which confers to its unique biological activity.
A glycoprotein is a protein that has a carbohydrate group attached to a polypeptide chain. FSH is secreted from the anterior pituitary gland, making it a pituitary glycoprotein. Pituitary glycoproteins all consist of an identical alpha subunit and a hormone-specific beta subunit. The gene is known as FSHB gene, follicle-stimulating hormone beta subunit. The molecular function for FSHB is to stimulate development of the follicle and spermogenesis in reproductive organs.
Sometimes we see mutations in the FSHB gene, which causes it to not properly function. This gene is encoded by a protein that is a member of family 1 of G protein-coupled receptors. This is a receptor for FSH and is important in functioning gonadal development. Mutations to this gene cause ovarian digenesis type 1 and ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. The mutant type is known as MGI.
Now for a brief history on the FSH molecule. FSH was discovered by three scientists, Fayol, Hysaw, and Leonard in 1931. Together they wrote the paper, The Gonad Stimulating and the Luteinizing Hormone of the Anterior Pituitary Lobe of the Hypothesis. Hysaw, being the leading reproductive biologist he was, also led the majority of research in this discovery. Fayol was a chemist, and Leonard was a graduate student who was in the process of working on this as part of his thesis.
Publication of the paper was groundbreaking. Before this, the question of how the pituitary might control ovarian function was not well understood. 5 years earlier, P.E. Smith proved that the pituitary played a crucial role by showing ovarian atrophy when the hypophysis was removed. This atrophy could be reversed in a few days with pituitary implants, but did not explain how or what was causing this change.
Fayol, Hysaw, and Leonard isolated two proteins with distinct functions from the anterior lobe of the pituitary that were acetone dried. They used rats, and they found that FSH stimulated sexual maturity in immature rats and stimulated ovarian follicle development. The other protein, LH, had no effect when given alone, but caused follicles that were stimulated by FSH to luteinize. These two accounted for all the ovarian effects of the whole pituitary extract.
Production and release of FSH is regulated by the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, which involves a number of circulating hormones released by the ovaries and the testes. GnRH, also known as gonadotropin-releasing hormone, is released by the hypothalamus and binds to the receptors in the anterior pituitary gland. From the anterior pituitary, FSH is synthesized and released into the bloodstream. It will then bind to receptors in the testes and the ovaries.
FSH isn't being released until after puberty. For example, it's the follicle-stimulating hormone, with the follicle being an egg in a woman. The egg isn't released until a woman menstruates for the first time. Women always have FSH, puberty just causes it to be released, making it cyclical and dependent on a life event. This applies to men with sperm also.
During each menstrual cycle, there is a rise and fall in FSH. When hormone levels fall in women during their menstrual cycle, typically the end, this is sensed by a nerve cell located in the hypothalamus. The cells then produce more GnRH, which then stimulates the pituitary gland to produce more FSH to be released into the bloodstream. The subsequent increase of FSH stimulates the growth of the follicle in the ovary. Cells in the follicle produce increasing amounts of oestradiol and inhibin. The hypothalamus and pituitary sense these hormones, and less GnRH and FSH are released.
FSH is clearly different in men and women, considering men don't produce eggs. In men, the production of FSH is regulated by circulating levels of testosterone and inhibin. Both of these are produced by the testes. FSH is responsible for regulating testosterone levels. When testosterone levels rise, the nerve cells in the hypothalamus sense it, and GnRH and FSH secretion is decreased. When testosterone levels decrease, the opposite happens. A negative feedback loop occurs, so the production of testosterone is steady. These hormones need to be regulated in both men and women. Data suggests that FSH is degraded slowly in an endosomal or lysosomal compartment.
But many people are still asking what exactly FSH does. To simplify it, the molecule acts on the testes and the ovaries. The receptor, which is known as FSHR, follicle-stimulating hormone receptor, is located in the ovaries and the testes and also in the uterus. As stated before by lovely Rachel, once FSH is released in women, an egg is released into the fallopian tubes where it can possibly be fertilized by sperm. In men, FSH acts to stimulate spermagenesis, also known as the production of sperm. People can live without FSH as it is only necessary for reproduction purposes.
Sometimes the body makes mistakes, causing molecules to be underproduced. This comes from a deficiency in FSH. An example is hypogonadism. This can happen in either males or females. This is when the absence of FSH in the ovaries and testes also causes a gonadotropin deficiency. In 80 to 99% of the people with hypogonadism, symptoms include delay in menarche, reduction of estradiol, little body hair, and smaller testes. Hypogonadism is typically rare and genetic. Underproduction can be caused by any sort of trauma the body experiences, like injury to the brain or the hypothalamus-pituitary axis.
Kallmann syndrome is an example of what happens due to the lack of FSH. People with this syndrome don't experience puberty due to the lack of secretion of GnRH. This also comes with physical features like a cleft palate and congenital abnormalities. Underproduction of FSH could be due to a mutation in the FSHB gene. The beta subunit, which is the hormone-specific part of the gene, is mutated, causing it to lose its ability to bind to the hormone. This causes similar problems as hypogonadism. Underproduction of this molecule can be caused by many other variables, such as gonadotroph adenoma, which is a benign tumor in men and can cause ovarian failure in women. An MRI is needed to diagnose this.
Treatment for underproduction of FSH can include hormone replacement therapy. Women can use this to stimulate FSH production to produce an egg and increase the chance of it being fertilized. It involves estrogen and progesterone. Men can have testosterone replacement therapy, which increases sperm count. These processes include the use of recombinant FSH, which is also known as rhFSH, which is a synthetic form of FSH. Hormone replacement therapy is extremely risky and can cause many health effects like heart attacks, strokes, hemorrhages, and cancer.
Hormone therapy can be extremely dangerous and even lead to overproduction of FSH. One example of it in women is called controlled ovarian hyperstimulation. Injecting yourself with hormones causes multiple follicles to be produced at one time in the ovaries, which can lead to multiple eggs being released at once. This can then lead to multiple pregnancies. Multiple pregnancies at one time is not only a life risk to the mother, but also risks to the child based on the fact that the likelihood they all make it to term decreases.
Another example of overproduction is that gonadal failure can lead to an increase in FSH. In order to test this, you need to test LH levels because FSH and LH work together, and in men test testosterone, prolactin, and serum estradiol. Even though when you think of men, you think of testosterone, estradiol controls a lot of the processes in men, like sperm production, sexual libido, etc. In women, test LH, estradiol, and prolactin levels. To confirm the overproduction of FSH diagnosis, an MRI of the pituitary gland is needed.
More causes of overproduction of FSH is sexual differentiation in men. This is when men don't develop or even reach puberty. This is shown in Klinefelter syndrome. In this syndrome, boys are born with an extra chromosome, making them XXY as opposed to XY. The extra X chromosome is attributed to the increased production of FSH. People with this syndrome experience infertility, small and firm testes, and low testosterone with high FSH and LH levels. In women, this is shown in Turner syndrome. Here, girls are born with only one X chromosome. The lack of an X chromosome throws off the hormone levels in the girls with this disease. People with this syndrome experience infertility, lack of height growth, and other physical features like epicanthial folds and low ears. Just like underproduction, overproduction can be because of infections, traumas, chemicals, or specifically ovarian failures.
As mentioned before, recombinant human follicle stimulating hormone is a synthetic version of the hormone, and it is gaining a position in the global hormone market. Advancements in vitro fertilization and new understandings of hormones have created a new market for women and babies. Many couples want the experience of having their own biological child. This opens up new opportunities to them and adds to the market of other synthetic hormones being produced.
Recent reports have contained various detailed assessments of the potential growth of this hormone market. It is predicted that it will continue to grow throughout the next 10 years. I think this display is accurate because the whole world is based off money. When someone needs something, they have to pay to get it. And with a medical treatment that helps give people something as meaningful as the ability to produce their own child, they'll want to do it.
Recent reports have shown that there are some actions of FSH that are not related to the gonads. Some of this includes the regulation of adipose tissues, both brown and white, and their functions with thermogenesis. Evidence shows that FSH may play a role in the control of aging and longevity. This alteration in FSH secretion may be a mechanism of trade-offs between the reproduction and aging. FSH works with non-reproductive tissues such as bone and fat tissues. Research found that the postmenopausal increase in FSH is likely due to increased adiposity and decreased bone mass and changes in energy metabolism that comes with later stages of life. As seen in the graphs to my right, after menopause, FSH levels increase and level off.
Other current research about FSH has involved seeing if there's a relationship between fasting and hormone levels. Researchers studied a group of Muslims during the month of Ramadan to see how their fasting affected their FSH, LH, and prolactin levels. A person who practices Islam during Ramadan can't eat from sunrise to sundown. After that, they can. This study pulled examples from other studies to conclude that since people are still eating at some point during the day, it is not enough to significantly change their FSH levels. Some studies showed no change in FSH levels, and the some that did show a change were still within normal range.
Researchers in China have recently found which mutation is more likely to cause infertility or make it difficult for women to get pregnant. This is based on a study of 158 women who are currently going through IVF treatment. A mutation to the FSHR gene at the 29th G to A site is found to be the cause for 63 of the 158 people in the study. This mutation basically doesn't allow FSH to properly bind, which in turn doesn't allow it to respond or function properly and release an egg.
Thanks for listening to our segment on FSH.
We hope you learned a lot and are more informed on the processes FSH is involved with.
Have a happy Halloween!